What do you tell yourself before you go to bed? What words sustain you when your heart is troubled? What song do you sing when your heart is joyful? What are the deep truths you turn to when the world seems to just fall apart? The ancient Psalms of the Hebrew people, the Psalms adopted by followers of Christ, are the ancient texts that comfort and console, lament and scream, laugh and shout. They are words we've used for thousands of years to reconnect with the people who sang them and the divine whom they sang to and through. Beloved, what's in your prayer book? What are the words on your lips? What blessings do you say as you arrive and as you depart? What is your song?
Psalm 22, my favorite psalm. It's my favorite psalm, not because of the psalm itself, but because this is the psalm that Jesus Christ from the cross. And it was imparted to me early on that, everyone takes this as some sort of cry of anguish or some sort of sadness or anger on Jesus' part, and perhaps it is. I don't know. I have no idea. But I think it's him doing what he was taught to do as a little boy, say his bedtime prayers, because the Psalms were the prayer book of the children of Israel. And so at the end, he was just doing what you do. You say your bedtime prayers. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from my cries of anguish? My God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer, by night, and I find no rest. But you, Lord, do not be far from me. You are my strength. Come quickly to help me. Deliver me from the sword, my precious life from the power of the dogs. Rescue me from the mouth of the lion. Save me from the horns of the wild ox. All the ends of the earth will remember and return to the Lord, and all families and nations will bow down, for all of the kingdom belongs to God, and God rules over all nations.
I've been very influenced by Brueggemann's work on the Psalms, and I think the different kinds of Psalms, but the beauty of them is, you have lament as well as celebration and praise and all the different aspects of the human experience, right? So there's a sense in which the Psalms humanize these texts. We tend to want to abstract theology from them, and they actually bring you back down to earth and what it means to be human and to go through all these things which all human beings do and actually move through those processes. And I actually love this about Brueggemann. He has this, he detects or discerns this pattern in the Psalms of orientation, disorientation, reorientation, but it's a sort of an honest description of how things really work, in life, right? We were disrupted by COVID. It's disoriented us in so many ways. It disrupted the way we've been oriented to life, and now we are in the process of reorienting ourselves. And we're not all doing that on the same page, but I mean that's a very human process, and the Psalms touch on every aspect of that.
When I was in seminary, one of the textual practices that a group did in Dr. Davidson's class was that, they would present a life situation and somebody would come up and say, there's a psalm for that, because there is.
Yeah. I mean, you think of all the Psalms and all the things about, the enemies and the rich people and all that. Like those are the realities, right? People like that's what we have that in our society. We literally have an antagonistic relationship with two halves of the country with one another, and so you have to figure out how to negotiate that to some extent.
So the Psalms can be kind of Luther called them a little Bible, like they're like this snapshot of the biblical witness in some ways. It relates to your lived experience. And
also the relationship with God in the midst of that lived experience.
Absolutely, yeah. Even, I mean, a great example of that, Tahina, is, the the cry of dereliction from the cross, Psalm 22. And a lot of people make the point that in the text, that is Jesus expressing that experience of being abandoned. But if you read the rest of that psalm, it takes you through to the to the divine presence, right? So and that is like people who knew those scriptures in an oral society, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they actually know that that's on the other end, but you have to feel the sense of abandonment, right? I mean, all of us have. I mean, or whatever you want to call it, right? So that's actually a good example of how a psalm works, where it touches that experience of being forsaken, or God's absence, or whatever you want to call it. But then you move through that. You move through that, and you reconnect with that sense of presence. So
Mm-hmm.
that's partly how they work. They don't just leave you. They don't just leave you either in a good place or a bad place. It's kind of you. That's what life is. I mean, it's a very Buddhist thing, right? You kind of we have emotions, and you just move through them. They're
Mm-hmm.
just they're not you. They're fleeting. They're real. They're important, but they're not.
Clouds in the sky.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I have this. I'm actually reading it now, kind of for my devotions. This Judas Zen Buddhist retranslated the Psalms with a Buddhist kind of.
What?
It's amazing. I'll get it for you if you want me to.
I would really love that
It's
because I think
amazing. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
please.
Yeah.
like that's one of the other things about the Psalms is that it does speak to our lived experience and our relationship with God.
Yeah.
And I remember like one of the most I'm going back to seminary, I think probably because we're in conversation with you. So I'm thinking about like my seminary experience. And I remember that for one of our textual understandings, we actually had to rewrite a psalm and follow the rhythmic patterns of that, because the realization of like this is also communicated rhythmically, so that there's a way that like even our heartbeat knows it and our bones know it, that it's not just up here, it's embodied.
Yeah.
And this realization of like writing a psalm that would speak to us in that present day, but yet still maintain that very strong tie to scripture.
Yeah. My whole life in this church, I feel, and I'm, we're all three of us are intellectuals, but I feel like we've just been in our heads so much that we need to, I mean, as a church, we're just very much up here in our head.
I think like that's part of why I've kind of tried to steer away from the purely intellectual. I think like that's part of why like I've been wanting to engage with like scripture and artistic practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Scripture and improv, scripture and art.
Part of our digital offering and part of you gathering today is to artistically express a psalm.
Nervous.
A reminder, this is a communal art project, and it's like, wait a minute, but these are individual canvases. How will this be communal? You will find out. This is an opportunity to creatively experience the Psalms, and we're using something called process painting. And process painting was created by Professor Larry Gross at Concordia University in Portland, Oregon. And this came from an experience that he had with an art therapy session. And he thought, well, this could also be like a theological experience, a scripture experience, and how to create and co-create with one another. And so I want to read to you the very complicated version of Psalm 8.
Okay.
People are so small next to you, God. You put the stars and the moon in the sky, and the birds in the air, above the cows and horses in the fields, and the fish that swim in the seas. You created all the beauty in the world. And so this is actually one of my favorite books ever, which is Psalms for Young Children. So at this time, we will be working with Psalm 8.
O Lord, our sovereign, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory above the heavens. Out of the mouths of babes and infants, you have founded a bulwark because of your foes, to silence the enemy and the avenger. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, what are human beings that you are mindful of them, mortals that you care for them? Yet you have made them a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honor. You have given them dominion over the works of your hands. You have put all things under their feet, all sheep and oxen, and also the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, and the fish of the sea, whatever passes along the paths of the seas. O Lord, our sovereign, how majestic is your name in all the earth.
I'm going to bring in the 62nd Psalm. I just love, I don't know, there's some Psalms that I read through, I'm like, I feel like they're talking. I feel like it's talking to me. When wealth bears fruit, don't set your heart on it. I mean, but I've been told, I've been raised in a culture that says, do set my heart on it. Try to get the wealth. You know, rely on violence when you need to. Don't, man up. Don't be a weakling. Show strength. And here, strength belongs to God. So I don't know. There's a lot about this psalm that kind of rocks me. Human beings are nothing but a breath. Human beings are nothing but lies. They don't even register on a scale. Taken all together, they are lighter than a breath. Don't trust in violence. Don't set false hopes in robbery. When wealth bears fruit, don't set your heart on it. God has spoken one thing, make it two things, that I myself have heard, that strength belongs to God and the faithful love comes from you, my Lord.
I feel like I finally get to feel my body in my faith as opposed to intellectualizing my faith. And I think that's why the Psalms, I really love them so much, because there's that very rhythmic pattern to them where you literally have to feel them in your body.
Yeah. Tahina, that actually reminds me, speaking of the creativity, I mean, that's the other big part of this conversation is how Jews have read scripture, like with Midrash, where the way a tradition keeps living is to be creatively used and creatively adapted. We've been conditioned to always try to figure out what it meant and then say what it means, but they just take it as a living text. They talk about the white fire between the lines and the fact that it's a living text that the Spirit animates and that you create out of it, which is what you're describing.
An artistic midrash. And so how do you have a midrash? Through artistic expression.
Yeah.
And that is a book that I've actually really loved getting to, and I don't want to say work through it because I don't feel like it was work. I think it was a book that I got to, like, if I could have, I would have ripped the pages out and eaten them because I just wanted that I wanted to feel that resonance and that art and that spirituality so much in my body, because I feel like I've had great training to be in my head, but I feel like I'm still continuing how to train my body in faith. And I feel like the Hebrew scriptures have helped me in that. And I feel like definitely the Psalms have helped me in that. I also think like the way that like we've been educated, not just in seminary, but just period of, I just keep going back to like the Schleiermacher method of theological education, and how I think like it has trained us intellectually, but I don't think it has trained us holistically.
No, exactly.
And I feel like there is this yearning for a holistic understanding of Scripture.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I'm Lutheran.
Yeah.
This tactile feeling of who God is in the world. And we get to have that.
Yeah. Luther was that way, and I think basically this is simplistic, but I think then Melanchthon and others systematized it, and so you move from this sort of embodied kind of full-bodied range of experience to confessions. Like you have these, and that's
It's very ordered. It's very systematic. It's
Yeah.
very well structured.
Yeah.
It reads like polity because
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
Good order can only get you so far.
Exactly,
And who
right.
is the order good for?
When I taught at the Episcopal Seminary in Austin, and the three of us, my other New Testament colleague, who's the dean there now, and the Hebrew Bible professor, we team taught the three required courses together. And so it was teaching with him, both of us, that it literally, like, oh my God, this, like, we actually started the biblical sequence by teaching the Deuteronomistic history, which is the whole Bible is shaped by the exile, right? So that experience of exile and restoration, which is, by the way, a pattern for interpreting death and resurrection, is the lens for the whole of Scripture. It's been shaped by the experience. And not all the texts obviously don't come from that, but it's rooted in experience. There's this guy, I forgot his name, at Union, the Hebrew Bible guy, who wrote this book, Trauma in the Bible. Do you know this book?
Oh.
It's fascinating, and he basically argues, and again, I think this, like all theses, it's an overstate. A lot of times, I mean, we all do this in our dissertation. You overstate your case to make your point, but the point's well taken that basically the whole Bible is a response to trauma, right? I mean, Exodus, exile,
Yeah.
the Maccabean revolt, crucifixion, these are all trauma events. And so again, it's in that experience of struggle and suffering and all those things that I mean, this is partly why people don't feel like they need God, because we're very individualized, first of all, but I mean, a lot of the search for God and the connection with God comes in what John of the Cross would call dark night of the soul, right?
Yeah. And also through the communal experiences, like
And
you're
through the
talking
communal
about, like
experience.
how you team taught and then
Right.
had an apocalypse, really, an unveiling of,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. Because I think that's such the value of like community and worship and being together, as opposed to individualized faith, is that there's something that my sibling in the faith is going to recognize that I'm not going to know until I'm with them.
Right. Right.
And it has to be an experiential thing too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's about the sharing of life and those things
Yeah.
as well. Yeah.
I didn't realize I had heard Psalm 40 until I started therapy. I was in a very bleak place in my life. I had just dropped out of graduate school and I had never failed anything in my life. And that was a point in my life that felt like a string of failures, and I didn't know how to live with failure. And not knowing how to live with failure was really hard because that meant I didn't know how to live. I started going to therapy, and the first sessions were just me paying my therapist $100 so I can sit and cry in his office. But when I actually started forming words to what was in my insides, and this was actually before I was also a practicing Christian, he had said, this sounds a lot like Psalm 40, that you are at the bottom of a pit. And we didn't talk about God at that point, but we were talking about what would it take to get out of the pit. Thinking about that so many years later today, the realization of it was God who took me out of the pit. And the realization of
I have been singing a new song, but also thinking about how long will I sing this particular song, and how long did I sing that song in that bleak phase of my life where singing the song was actually just weeping, and that was the only song I knew at the time. I waited patiently for the Lord. He inclined and heard my cry. He lifts me up out of the pit, out of the miry clay. I will sing, sing a new song. I will sing, sing a new song. How long to sing this song? How long to sing this song?
You are my shepherd, I am content. You lead me to rest in the sweet grasses, to lie down by quiet waters, and I am refreshed. You lead me down the right path, the path that unwinds in the pattern of your name. And even if I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will not fear, for you are with me, comforting me, and with your rod and staff, showing me each step. You prepare a table for me in the midst of my adversity, and moisten my head with oil. Surely my cup is overflowing, and goodness and kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and in the long days beyond, I will always live within your house.
Today's worship is brought to you by the Anam Cara community, one of the constellation of offerings by this new digital mission start of the North Carolina Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. If you want to know more about who we are and what we do, visit anamcaracommunity.org. And if you trust that this work and content are meaningful for you, please give on our website under the Give tab.
We know God is with us in this beautiful yet broken world. Thank you for being you. And thank you for being here.